Chapter 1. The clock on the wall struck 8 when Ethan Blackwood finally came home, a cake box in hand. Felicity Gardner didn't greet him at the door with her usual adoring eyes. He didn't find this strange. Instead, he walked straight into the living room and casually placed the cake in front of her. Happy 5th anniversary. Felicity's expression was unreadable, showing none of the surprise he had expected. That was the day before yesterday. What? Ethan looked up. Our wedding anniversary. It was the day before yesterday. After a pause, she glanced at the crushed peanuts decorating the cake, a flicker of irony in her heart. Also, I'm allergic to peanuts. At her words, Ethan froze for a moment, but his face remained impassive. He took the cake away, a hint of apology on his face, and pulled a square box from his pocket, handing it to her. Sorry, I've been traveling so much for work lately, I forgot. I'll be more careful next time. Even though the anniversary has passed, you still get a gift. Felicity opened the box. As expected, it was a star-shaped necklace. In 5 years of marriage, every gift he had ever given her involved stars. A star bracelet, star earrings, a star necklace. When Felicity had first asked Ethan why, he had said it was because he liked stars. Only later did she learn the real reason he gave her star-themed gifts was because of a person. Stella Quinn, his first love. It wasn't the stars he loved, but the woman named Stella. Seeing Felicity accept the gift, Ethan assumed she had believed his excuse and added, I missed it this year, but I'll make it up to you with a grand celebration next year. With that, he took off his suit jacket and walked into the bathroom. He didn't notice Felicity watching his retreating back, her voice a low murmur. There's no need, Ethan, we don't have a next year. She had already decided to divorce him. Just then, her phone rang. She glanced down, it was her boss. Felicity, are you sure you want to transfer abroad? Felicity affirmed without a shred of hesitation. Yes, I've made up my mind. A year ago, the company had opened a branch overseas and needed a resident director. Her boss, Lisa, recognized her talent and had brought it up many times, stressing what a rare opportunity it was. But for Ethan's sake, she had refused. Because she had promised him she would never abandon him. She and Ethan had been neighbors since they were children, practically growing up together. When they were in elementary school, Ethan's parents fought constantly and were never home, paying him no mind. That was when she had burst into his life. The day his parents divorced, both chose to start new families, and neither wanted him. A small boy, not yet 8, watched calmly as they walked away with their luggage, not saying a single word to stop them. He just sat alone on the stairs, reading a book. It was she who had approached him with a smile. Hey, my dad made his famous sweet and sour ribs today. I can't finish them all. Want to come over and help me out? The first time, he refused, but he couldn't resist her persistence. From sweet and sour ribs to spicy fish and braised shrimp, she dragged him to her house for one meal after another. She was the one who accompanied him, day by day, through those lonely years of his youth. Later, they went to the same university. That was where he met Stella Quinn. He was the medical school's golden boy, and she was the belle of the dance academy. When they dated, they were considered the perfect match, a golden couple in the eyes of their professors. But after graduation, Stella, chasing her dream, chose to go abroad, ignoring Ethan's pleas for her to stay. He had been abandoned once again. And once again, it was Felicity who stood by his side. That night, he got terribly drunk. The man who was always so proud and self-possessed clung to her waist, his eyes red. Is it my fault? Why does everyone abandon me? Her heart ached. Suppressing her own sorrow, she stroked his hair. You still have me, I'm still here. Felicity Gardner will never abandon Ethan Blackwood. He looked up slightly, and before she could react, he cupped the back of her head and kissed her. When the kiss ended, her face was flushed. He buried his head in her neck and whispered, Felicity, you have a crush on me, don't you? From today on, I will forget Stella Quinn. Be my girlfriend, okay? Her long-held wish was finally coming true. She couldn't bring herself to say no. Later, he kept his promise and truly never mentioned Stella Quinn again. They got along well, moving from dating to a proposal and step by step into marriage. For 5 years, he had honored that promise perfectly. He never mentioned Stella and was good to her, so much so that Felicity began to believe he had really forgotten her. Until the day she posted on her social media feed that she wanted to see the Northern Lights. Knowing Ethan was a busy surgeon, she never mentioned it to him directly. A few days before their anniversary, she found flight tickets to Iceland in his drawer. She thought he had seen her post and was planning a surprise for her. She pretended not to know, waiting for him to reveal it. But on the eve of their anniversary, he simply said he had a business trip and left with the tickets. She was a little surprised. Then, on the day of their anniversary, she saw Stella Quinn's social media post. "One last time seeing the aurora with you, then I'm coming home with you." The accompanying photo was of a man's back. Though blurry, Felicity recognized him at once. It was Ethan, the man who had claimed to be on a business trip. It was only then she noticed that on the same day she had posted about the northern lights, Stella had also made a post about wanting to see them one last time before returning home. She finally understood. The surprise was never meant for her. The white moonlight, his unforgettable first love for 5 years, he had never spoken of her, but he had never forgotten her either. In that moment, she finally decided to give up on this hopeless marriage, to abandon him. Chapter 2, on the other end of the line, Lisa seemed to guess something from her resolute tone and sighed. "Did something happen between you and Ethan?" Felicity didn't answer, which was an answer in itself. After a moment, her boss's comforting voice came through. "Don't be sad, Felicity. We all have to move forward. Look, I've booked you a flight for the end of the month. Take this next month as a vacation to handle your personal affairs. After all, once you go, you probably won't be coming back." Felicity nodded. "Thank you, Lisa." The next day, Felicity went to the office to hand over all her work. When she finished, it was lunchtime. A group of her colleagues, reluctant to let her go, insisted on taking her out for a meal. "Felicity's getting a promotion and a transfer. You have to treat us to a meal. Exactly once you're gone. Who knows when we'll see you again. For this last meal, we have to make you splurge." Felicity didn't refuse. But when they got to the restaurant, everyone tacitly avoided ordering the most expensive dishes. The group laughed and joked, the cheerful atmosphere dispelling the faint sadness of her departure. After the meal, Felicity smiled and said her goodbyes to everyone, then gathered her things from the office and went home. The moment she opened the door, she froze. Ethan was still home. Seeing Felicity, he frowned. "Why are you back so early?" He also noticed the box in her arms. Caught off guard, Felicity paused for a second but quickly recovered, explaining calmly, "The company gave me some time off, so I brought back a few things I'll need." "Why aren't you at work today?" Her question seemed to catch Ethan off guard. After a moment, he just said he wanted to clear his head and had taken his annual leave. He was a workaholic who almost never took time off. It was highly unlikely he would take his annual leave just to clear his head. Just as he realized how flimsy his excuse sounded and was about to explain further, she simply nodded and walked past him toward the bedroom, carrying the box. She knew better than anyone that he took leave to go with Stella to see the northern lights. In the past, she would have pressed him, would have felt hurt. But now that she had decided to give up, she no longer had the energy to pursue it. She just believed him like that. For a moment, a strange emotion washed over him. He couldn't tell if it was relief or disappointment. When Felicity came out after putting her things away, Ethan, remembering the anniversary he'd gotten wrong and feeling they both had time off, offered to make it up to her. Felicity looked down and shook her head. "Let's just forget it." Her calmness made Ethan feel a strange sense of panic. He pressed on, "I was too busy before and didn't have time for you. Since we're both on leave now, you can tell me anything you wish for." Looking at his earnest expression, Felicity felt a wave of detachment. She realized that perhaps Ethan was starting to sense that something was wrong. She wanted a quiet departure without any drama, so after a moment's thought she said, "Then just do 3 things for me." A slight smile touched Ethan's lips. "All right. What's the first thing?" Felicity smiled back, but the smile never reached her eyes. "Cook me a meal." Her request made Ethan pause. It was such a simple thing. But he didn't ask further, simply saying, "Then let's go grocery shopping together later." Felicity nodded, watching him go to get ready, her mind drifting. She had known for a long time that Ethan could cook, but in all these years, he had never once cooked for her. When they were friends, she never made a request that crossed the line, and he never offered. Later, when he was dating Stella, all his tenderness was reserved for her. After learning that Stella had a sensitive stomach, he cooked for her every day and brought it to her. Back then, to be considerate of Stella's feelings, he had even suggested reducing his contact with Felicity. So, of course, she never had the chance to eat his cooking. After that, they dated and married. But by then, he had started his demanding job at the hospital. He was often so busy he forgot to eat himself, let alone cook for her. So, in all these years, this would be the first time. That afternoon, they went to the supermarket to buy groceries. The shopping was simple and without disagreement. They quickly bought what they needed and returned home. But just as Ethan put down the groceries, his phone rang. He picked it up, glanced at the name on the screen, and then shot a quick look at Felicity before answering. "What's wrong?" "Ethan, some friends are throwing me a welcome back party. Will you come?" He agreed instinctively, his voice softening without him even realizing it. Beside him, Felicity, who had been helping, suddenly paused. Without looking up, she asked casually, "Who is it?" The person on the other end of the phone seemed to have heard her voice growing a little louder. "Is Felicity there?" "Ethan, you should bring her along. It's been so long since I've seen you too." Ethan wanted to refuse, but seeing Felicity now looking at him, her expression perfectly normal, he felt that refusing after he had already agreed would seem deliberate. He swallowed the refusal that was on the tip of his tongue, glanced at Felicity, who had already nodded, and agreed. Chapter 3, the welcome back party was that very evening. Ethan didn't mention cooking again and drove Felicity to the address Stella had sent. They had received the invitation late, so by the time they arrived at the private room, everyone else was already there, and the atmosphere was lively. The room was noisy with people catching up, teasing each other, and some even bringing up the whirlwind romance between Stella and Ethan back in the day. A nudge of an elbow silenced them, but the chatter gradually died down as everyone noticed the new arrivals. Felicity sat down next to Ethan. As soon as she was seated, she noticed him unconsciously shift a little away from her, his gaze drifting toward Stella, who was the center of attention. Seeing that they had arrived, Stella quickly came over with a glass of wine, raised it to him, and then her eyes shifted to Felicity beside him. "Ethan, Felicity, I hear you've been married for 5 years. Congratulations." At the mention of 5 years, Ethan's expression shifted slightly. After all, it had also been 5 years since he and Stella had broken up. He desperately wanted to control himself and not act too obvious in front of Felicity, but the moment he saw Stella, he lost control of his actions. When he saw her drinking glass after glass, he started to advise her, "Your period should be coming soon, you should drink less." The temperature in the room felt a little low. When Stella shivered, he immediately offered her his jacket. When Stella glanced at a dessert, he proactively brought it to her. Eating the dessert Ethan brought her, Stella smiled. Her gaze went past him to land on Felicity, a hint of a taunt in her eyes. "Ethan, you're taking such good care of me. Aren't you afraid your wife will get angry?" Only then did he seem to remember what he had forgotten. He turned his head in a panic and saw her calm, cold face. He returned to Felicity's side. "I'm sorry, Felicity, it's fine. Old classmates haven't seen each other in years. It's only right to take care of her." She shook her head, her voice calm, which only made Ethan more flustered. He picked up a plate of dessert from the table and placed it in front of Felicity. "I remember you don't like noisy places. If you're not comfortable, I can take you home first." She shook her head. Her eyes fell on the dessert he had brought her, and she suddenly smiled, the irony in her heart deepening. Peanuts again. Even though she had told him just yesterday that she was allergic. "Ethan, how little do you care about me?" She pushed the plate away without a word. Ethan, feeling the crisis had been averted, had already returned to Stella's side. Just then, someone suggested playing a turntable game to liven things up. Felicity and Ethan were included. The first spin landed on Ethan, and everyone got excited. But their excitement died down when they saw the penalty. Stella leaned in to look. The penalty was to kiss a member of the opposite sex present. "Oh, come on, Dr. Blackwood brought his wife. We all know who he's going to pick. How boring." Ethan glanced at Stella, remained silent for a long moment, and then, unexpectedly, chose to accept the penalty of drinking. Everyone was shocked by his choice and looked at Felicity. Before she could say anything, Stella had already smoothed things over. It seems that even after 5 years, Ethan is still the untouchable flower on the high mountain. Remembering their passionate university romance, not many people believed this excuse. They laughed it off and started the next round, but unfortunately, it landed on Ethan again. When they saw the penalty was just to show his phone's photo album, The people next to him breathed a sigh of relief. It was just showing a photo album. Given Ethan's workaholic nature, even if there were no pictures of Felicity, it would probably be filled with work-related photos. Since he couldn't take 2 penalties in a row, Ethan had no choice but to open his photo album. But when everyone saw the photos inside, they all took a sharp breath, holding it unconsciously. It was full of pictures of Stella. The air instantly froze. Felicity stood up to leave, but Ethan reached out and grabbed her arm. The movement revealed a dense red rash on his hand. Everyone was startled. A moment's thought and they understood the reason. Ethan had only drunk alcohol. He must have a severe allergy to it. Someone gasped in surprise. "Dr. Blackwood, your allergy is so severe. Why did you drink?" But before the sentence was finished, everyone remembered the photos in Ethan's phone. As if suddenly understanding, they all turned their gazes to Felicity, some with amusement, some with pity. Felicity, however, acted as if nothing was wrong. She pulled his hand away and said one sentence, "I'll go buy some medicine." Chapter 4. By the time Felicity returned with the medicine, the mood for games had been thoroughly spoiled. People made their excuses and left one by one. Only Stella remained, helping a shaky Ethan out. Seeing Felicity approach, she let go of him. "Since you're here, I'll leave Ethan in your hands." With that, she turned and left without a backward glance. Felicity paid her no mind. She gave Ethan the allergy medication with some water and then called a cab to take him home. When they got home, Ethan was fully sober. Seeing her still by his side, he breathed a sigh of relief. "Felicity, let me explain. You know I never take pictures. Those were all old photos I forgot to delete." He thought he would have to explain for a long time to coax her, but she just looked at him deeply and then nodded calmly. "I know. Photos he hadn't deleted in 5 years. A person he hadn't forgotten in 5 years." She smiled to herself. "Ethan Blackwood, you are so devoted." The next day, probably out of guilt, a well-rested Ethan immediately offered to make up for the meal he had missed cooking yesterday. But Felicity refused. "There's no need. Grandma's death anniversary is in a few days. Come with me to visit her. You promised to do 3 things for me. This is the second." Ethan was taken aback for a moment, then nodded in agreement. On the day of her grandmother's death anniversary, Felicity and Ethan set out for the cemetery early in the morning. This was the first time Ethan had come to see her grandmother since she had passed away. In previous years, on this day, he would always say he had a business trip. It wasn't until Felicity found the thick stack of flight tickets to France hidden away that she knew. And France was where Stella lived. Felicity realized that every one of his so-called business trips was a secret visit to see Stella. Felicity walked to her grandmother's grave. Just as she was about to speak, Ethan's phone rang. He answered it, and after hearing whatever was said on the other end, his face changed drastically, and he hurriedly left the cemetery. "Felicity, something's come up, I have to leave." He didn't even have time to give her an explanation. "Ethan Blackwood." Felicity couldn't stop herself from calling out his name. He paused for a second, but didn't even turn his head as he walked away. She drew her gaze back and looked at her grandmother's grave, placing the flowers she held in front of the headstone. She didn't want her grandmother to worry, so she chattered on about other things, but in the end, after holding it in for so long, she couldn't stop the tears from welling in her eyes. "Grandma, I'm getting a divorce." When Felicity left the cemetery, it was just noon. The weather wasn't too hot yet. The area was remote, making it hard to get a cab, so she decided to walk for a while to a place with more traffic. She never expected that danger would come with the increased flow of cars. The light turned green, and she started to cross the street. But after only a few steps, she heard the piercing screech of a horn. She turned to look and saw a car with failing brakes hurtling towards her a few seconds later. Bang! Felicity was thrown violently to the ground. Screams erupted around her, mixed with the murmurs of onlookers and someone shouting to call 911. In the next moment, she lost consciousness completely. When she came to, she was already in the hospital. Vaguely, she heard people talking nearby. "Dr. Blackwood, we just got another car accident patient. The situation is very serious. Could you come take a look?" The person being addressed hesitated for a few seconds before refusing. "Have someone else cover for now. I have another surgery here that's more important." The voice was very familiar. In an instant, Felicity recognized who it was. Ethan Blackwood, her husband. Remembering his hurried departure from the cemetery, she understood everything. His more important surgery was, of course, for Stella Quinn. A doctor, seeing she was awake, urged her to contact her family. But she shook her head, gritted her teeth, and took the surgical consent form to sign her own name, a self-deprecating smile on her face. There's no need. My husband, he's operating on someone else. On the other side, an hour later, Ethan finally emerged from the operating room. Fortunately, Stella's injuries from the car accident were not severe and the surgery was simple. He let out a sigh of relief. Remembering what the nurse had said earlier, he didn't take off his scrubs but asked a nurse beside him, "Where is the other patient who was brought in earlier? I'll go over now." "Dr. Blackwood, we've arranged for another doctor to take over for that patient. However, the patient has severe bleeding. With your experience, it would be best if you went to check." Ethan had the same idea. Following the nurse's directions, he walked quickly to that operating room. He pushed open the door and strode over to check the patient's condition. But when he saw the blood-covered person on the operating table, he froze completely. Felicity. Chapter 5. When Felicity woke up, Ethan was slumped over by her bedside, asleep. She shifted her hand slightly, and he jolted awake. Seeing her conscious, his eyes filled with guilt and lingering fear. The man who was usually so cold and composed for the first time pulled her into a tight embrace. "Felicity, I'm so sorry. I really didn't know the other patient was you. I'm sorry, it will never happen again." Felicity's face was still pale, but when she looked at Ethan, there was not a trace of blame in her eyes. "I know, I understand, Ethan. It's okay." She smiled and shook her head, generously forgiving him for being a husband who abandoned his wife, and a doctor who, for personal reasons, abandoned a more seriously injured patient. She gave him the greatest possible understanding. But Ethan, having been forgiven so easily, felt a strange unease. It was happening again. For some reason, that thick sense of dread crept back into his heart. He looked at the woman lying quietly in the hospital bed. They were so close, yet he suddenly felt that she was miles away. He took her hand, his eyes filled with panic. "Felicity, you won't leave me, will you?" Her expression didn't change as she nodded. "Yes, I won't leave." Reassured by her promise, Ethan finally relaxed. He looked up and saw that her IV drip was almost finished. He turned and left the room, saying he would get a nurse to change it. But the IV bag emptied completely, and he still hadn't returned. Felicity looked down with a mocking smile and pressed the call button next to her bed to summon a nurse. Saying he was going to get a nurse, he could have just used the call button. He insisted on going to the nurse's station himself. A trip that should have taken only a few minutes stretched on, and he never came back. He was that eager, couldn't even wait a quarter of an hour. The moment he heard her words of forgiveness, he immediately ran to the side of his beloved. When Ethan returned, it was already afternoon. He carried a lunch box, his face full of apology. "Sorry, something came up." He looked up and saw the changed IV bag, relieved. He then put down the lunch box. "Eat something first. You can only have liquids right now, so I made some porridge. Try it." This was the first time Felicity had ever eaten something Ethan had made himself. It was light and bland, perfect for a patient. It seemed very thoughtful. She didn't say a word, letting him feed her the porridge spoonful by spoonful. Then she picked up her phone and saw that Stella had updated her social media feed. The picture was of a bowl of porridge, identical to the one she had just eaten. The caption read, "The porridge my favorite person specially made for me. It's delicious, I love it." A mocking curve formed on her lips, but she still said nothing. She simply turned off her phone, turned her back to him, and closed her eyes. Felicity was hospitalized for half a month. During this time, Ethan took care of her. Aside from occasionally disappearing for a while, and the food he brought always having an identical counterpart on Stella's social media, he could truly be called responsible. And every time he returned from running between the two of them, he would apologize to her with a guilty conscience. And every time, she would generously forgive him. Ethan always felt a strange feeling in his heart, but couldn't pinpoint where it came from, so he eventually chose to ignore it. On the day she was discharged, Ethan came to pick her up. Fortunately, she didn't have many things, so he could still spare a hand to support her. When they reached the underground parking garage, Felicity sat in the passenger seat, but after putting the luggage in the trunk, Ethan didn't get in the car. She turned her head to look outside, but only saw his back. When he reappeared, Stella Quinn was by his side. Felicity hadn't expected Stella to be discharged on the same day. She was stunned for a moment, by which time Stella had already walked up to her side, her voice soft and delicate. "Felicity, I'm so sorry to bother you again. But I get carsick. Could I sit in the front seat?" Her sudden provocative request stunned them both. But after hearing her words, Ethan instinctively looked at Felicity. Felicity, Chapter 6. Ethan's favoritism made Stella even more smug. Her eyes were fixed on Felicity, hoping to see anger and hurt on her face, but she was destined for disappointment. Felicity remained calm. Without saying a word, she got out of the car, walked to the back seat, and gave up the front passenger seat. This move left not only Stella, but also Ethan baffled as to what she was thinking. He just assumed she was angry at him because of Stella. He first drove Stella home. When he was ready to turn back and explain things to Felicity, he found she had already closed her eyes, looking as if she were asleep. Ethan didn't dare disturb her and could only drive home. The entire way, she sat in the back seat without a word, giving him no opportunity to speak. After they got home, Felicity woke up at the right moment. Feeling guilty, he bustled around behind her, saying he had nothing to do today and could spend the whole day with her. He thought she would be happy, but she just raised an eyebrow and left him with two meaningful words. "Is that so?" Her questioning tone always made Ethan feel as if she knew something. He grew flustered and asked what she meant. Felicity just shook her head. "Nothing. You're a doctor, after all. If the hospital needs you, you wouldn't ignore everyone else just for me." The explanation was very reasonable. At least, in their 5 years of marriage, he had never given up his work at the hospital for her. If it weren't for the fact that he had rejected her, a more seriously injured patient, for Stella, she probably would never have known that he was capable of being so reckless for personal reasons. But Ethan didn't think too much about it, assuming that was her real thought, and breathed a sigh of relief. He stayed with her for a long time, taking meticulous care of her. If she were just his patient, she would probably like such a responsible and patient doctor, and she wouldn't have to worry about who truly held his heart. As night fell, just as Felicity was surprised that he hadn't left for some other matter, the expected phone call came. It was Stella. She cried on the phone, saying that it was getting dark, and she had tried to turn on the lights, but they were broken. She was alone at home and scared, and asked if he could come and take a look. Ethan glanced at Felicity, a look of difficulty on his face. He hesitated, unable to say no directly, but also not immediately agreeing. On the other end, Stella seemed to guess his hesitation and began to sob softly. One suppressed sob after another came through the phone, making his heart ache. Finally, he looked at Felicity, his face full of guilt. "Felicity, a very difficult patient just came into the hospital. I have to go take a look." Hearing this, Felicity didn't stop him. On the contrary, she was very understanding. "It's okay, you go. The patient is more important." With her consent, his psychological burden was lifted. He grabbed his coat from the hook by the door and, before rushing out, left her with one last sentence. "You rest well at home. I'll be back. I'll try to make more time for you in the future." As she watched his retreating back, she let out a sneer. "There won't be a future, Ethan Blackwood, and I won't be waiting for you anymore." 5 hours later, with the clock on the wall about to strike midnight, Felicity finally gave him a call. She listened to the long ring, until the call automatically disconnected from being unanswered. Then she dialed a second number. This time, the call was answered, but by a woman's voice. "Felicity, are you looking for Ethan? He's in the shower right now and can't come to the phone." Chapter 7, her words were so thick with a sense of ownership that anyone who didn't know the situation would have thought Stella was Ethan Blackwood's legitimate wife. She thought this would finally make Felicity angry, but to her surprise, her tone remained perfectly calm, without a hint of anger. "It's all right. Since he's with you, just let him rest well." Stella couldn't understand it. She had provoked her so blatantly. How could she still hold back her anger, not even showing a hint of sadness? Was she really that tolerant, or did she love Ethan so much that as long as he was by her side, nothing else mattered? The next day, when Felicity saw Ethan return with a normal expression, she guessed that Stella probably hadn't told him about the phone call last night. But she didn't care. After all, she was leaving soon anyway. On the other hand, Ethan, perhaps feeling he owed her a great deal lately, spent the next few days with Felicity, taking her to an amusement park and to the movies. Until one day, he suddenly asked her to help him pick out a gift. Felicity accompanied him to jewelry stores, accessory shops, and even a flower shop. He always felt the gifts weren't good enough, constantly asking her if this or that was appropriate. Felicity was very responsible, giving him many suggestions. Watching him agonize over a gift, Felicity somehow thought of all the gifts he had chosen for her over the past 5 years. When choosing a gift for her, he was never this indecisive. After all, for every holiday and anniversary, the gifts he gave her were always related to stars. But because Felicity showed no reaction, he didn't notice anything unusual. After buying the carefully selected gift and ordering flowers from the florist, he was ready to take Felicity home. But then she suddenly spoke up, "Who is this gift for?" He then realized he hadn't explained. "Stella gave me 2 tickets to her ballet performance and invited me to bring you along. I thought since we're going to her performance, we should bring her a gift." Felicity nodded and asked no more questions. Soon, the day of the ballet performance arrived. Since there was still some time before the show, they first went to the flower shop to pick up the pre-ordered flowers before heading to the theater. They found their seats according to the tickets. Felicity had assumed he wasn't interested in these things and was only here because of Stella. After all, Felicity, also an art student, had once invited him to art exhibitions, only to be met with his "I'm not interested in these things" reply. But as soon as the performance began, he watched with great concentration. When Stella appeared on stage, watching her perform, he even began to explain the different pieces to her. It was only then, seeing Ethan so knowledgeable about ballet, that Felicity finally understood. It wasn't that he wasn't interested in art, but that he was indifferent to any art that wasn't related to Stella Quinn. She smiled sadly, but in the end said nothing. After all, it probably wouldn't make a difference. After the performance, Felicity and Ethan went backstage to wait for Stella. They thought it wouldn't take long, but Stella was nowhere to be seen. Just then, a chaotic shouting came from the direction of the front lobby. Upon inquiry, they learned that a fire had broken out in the lobby for some reason, and many people were trapped inside. Felicity instinctively looked at Ethan and, as expected, saw his face turn pale with panic. He didn't even have time to think. His mind went blank, with only one thought remaining. Stella was still in there. He had to save her. Chapter 8. Felicity grabbed Ethan's hand, her eyes filled with disapproval. "There's a fire station nearby, and someone has already called for help. The firefighters will be here soon. It's too dangerous for you to go in now." But he couldn't hear her pleas. He yanked his hand away with force, pushing her aside, and rushed headlong into the front lobby. Felicity, who had stumbled and fallen, watched his back quickly disappear from sight, her heart sinking to the bottom. The firefighters arrived quickly and rescued everyone trapped in the lobby. When Ethan was brought out, Felicity immediately saw the large burn on his arm. But he seemed oblivious to the pain, clinging tightly to Stella's hand, terrified she would be left behind. Stella, securely protected by him, was largely unharmed. Hearing that he had rushed into the fire after it started, a firefighter berated him soundly, saying that no matter how anxious he was, he shouldn't have rushed in without any protective gear. With both of them now safely out of the fire, his heart finally settled. He held the sobbing Stella, comforting her in a low voice, and quietly accepted the firefighter's scolding without a word of rebuttal. Soon, the ambulance arrived. Ethan, because of his injured arm, was also taken to the hospital. From beginning to end, his hand never let go of Stella's. Felicity was left far behind. She laughed at herself. Look, isn't their love grand? So worthy of praise. For Stella, he would risk his life and rush into a fire. For Stella, he could be so careless with his hands, the most important tool for a surgeon. In the end, Felicity took a cab to the hospital herself. After asking around and finding out where he was, she headed for the inpatient ward. Before she left, she vaguely heard nurses gossiping. Is she the wife of the man who was just brought in, the one Dr. Blackwood was holding onto and wouldn't let go? One is the wife who loves him. The other is the white moonlight he loves. Felicity pushed those voices behind her, but couldn't help thinking, see, even strangers can see how you act. How stupid do you think I am, to believe you've hidden it so well that I haven't noticed your change of heart? What excuse will you use this time? She walked into Ethan's hospital room. The moment he saw her, he finally remembered what he had forgotten. He scrambled to get up, accidentally bumping his injured hand. He couldn't help but look up at her face, but she remained, as always, expressionless, and without a hint of worry. Ethan knew he had gone too far this time. He could only coax Stella to leave first. Seeing her walk out of the room, he then turned to Felicity with a face full of shame and apologized. "Felicity, I was just so panicked. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave you behind." She sat down by the bed, looked at his bandaged arm, and stared at him fixedly. For the first time, she didn't immediately say she forgave him. "You promised me you would forget Stella Quinn. Does that promise still stand?" His breath caught in his throat. Then he nodded, giving her a firm answer. "It stands. Felicity, I'm just used to protecting her. I have no other intentions." Whether she believed him or not, she didn't bring it up again. Fortunately, the burn on Ethan's hand wasn't serious. After a few days of recovery in the hospital, he was discharged. On the day of his discharge, Felicity checked the calendar on her phone. There were only 3 days left until her departure. Chapter 9, 3 days before she left, Felicity deleted all her social media accounts, including her phone number. She didn't tell anyone. It wasn't until Ethan found he couldn't contact her and anxiously asked what had happened that she offered a pre-planned excuse without even looking up. "I didn't delete them. There's probably just an issue with the accounts. I'll look into it later." The excuse was flimsy, but Ethan didn't overthink it. Hearing her explanation, he left the house, relieved. 2 days before she left, Felicity packed up all her belongings. What needed to be thrown away was thrown away. What needed to be dealt with was dealt with. Then, looking at the much emptier house, she thought, "Good thing he told me in advance he wouldn't be home today." Finally, she took out her phone and made a call. "Mr. Davison, please draft a divorce agreement for me." On the last day before her departure, Felicity gathered all the star-related gifts Ethan had ever given her, along with the flight tickets from his secret trips to France to see Stella over the past 5 years. She placed everything in a box. On top, she put a love letter written in his voice and sent it all to Stella Quinn. For so many years, he had never forgotten Stella. Since he couldn't say it himself, she would say it for him. After mailing the package, she returned home to find Ethan there. Looking at the empty house, he frowned and couldn't help but ask, "Did you throw a lot of things out? The house feels so empty." Perhaps because she was leaving today, she didn't bother to hide it anymore. "Yes, I threw out everything we bought when we got married." Ethan thought she was just decluttering and didn't pay it much mind. "Well, I'll go with you to buy new things in a while." Felicity didn't answer. Instead, she brought up the last matter. "We had our wedding reception at Phoenix Crest Manor. You told me then that when we celebrate our golden anniversary, we would have another grand celebration there. Do you remember?" "Yes, what about it?" The man paused, turning to look at her. "It wasn't their golden anniversary yet. You still owe me one last thing from the 3 you promised. Take me to Phoenix Crest Manor today. I want to go back and see it." Ethan found her sudden request strange, but he eventually agreed. Phoenix Crest Manor was in the far suburbs, a considerable drive away. When they arrived, Felicity walked ahead into the manor. Ethan followed behind, watching her seemingly cheerful back, and felt a little dazed. He couldn't remember the last time he had seen her like this. Looking back over the past month, his most vivid memory of her was her calm face as she told him, "It's okay." In his daze, his phone suddenly rang, pulling him back to reality. He looked down and saw the name Stella on the screen, but he didn't answer immediately. He looked up again at Felicity's back in the distance. A sense of unease crept into his heart, a voice in his head telling him that if he answered this call, he would lose her completely. But the urgent ringing of the phone persisted, and Felicity heard it too. She turned back to look at him, her expression returning to its usual calmness. "It's okay. If you have something urgent, you can go first." As if granted a release, he ignored the unease in his heart and quickly answered the phone. Hearing Stella's tearful voice on the other end, saying she was being followed and asking for his help, his reason was instantly thrown to the wind. "Felicity, I'll be right back. You look around on your own for a bit." He didn't have time for a proper goodbye and rushed out of the manor. She watched his back, sighing deeply. "Ethan Blackwood, this time I won't wait for you anymore. We won't see each other again." She didn't go any further into the manor, nor did she wait. After lingering for a short while, she turned and left. Their marriage began here, and now it ended here. It was a fitting way to close this chapter of her life. After returning home, Felicity took out her already packed suitcase, left a signed divorce agreement on the table, and dragged her luggage out the door. After closing the door, she called a cab and headed straight for the airport. From beginning to end, her departure was one of relief and resolution. She never once looked back. Chapter 10, when Ethan found Stella Quinn, he discovered her claim of being followed was a lie. He was furious, but she dismissed his anger, clinging to his arm and cooing, "Well, that's because you've been spending all your time with that Felicity Gardner and have no time for me. Ethan, I missed you." "Ethan, when are you going to tell her the truth?" Her question made Ethan freeze. He looked at her, confused, not understanding what she meant. Stella saw his confusion and was annoyed, but remembering the package she had received today, she let go of his arm and went to get it. "If you hadn't suddenly sent me all this, I would have never known that you never forgot me, that you even flew abroad to see me so many times. And this love letter, seeing how sincere you are, I'll accept." She pulled out the love letter and raised her eyebrows at him smugly. "But since I've accepted, shouldn't you divorce her first? I have no intention of being the other woman." He stared at the things in her hand and at the wedding ring pushed to the side of the box. The tightly wound string in his mind suddenly snapped. "You're saying I sent this to you?" His sudden shout startled Stella. She picked up the wedding ring from the box and tossed it to him. "Who else? The return address is from near your house, and isn't this the wedding ring you took off a while ago? But I don't want a ring you shared with someone else. You have to buy me a new one." He fumbled to catch the ring, his mind numb. The style and size were clearly Felicity's, and he had never sent Stella any of these things. It was obvious who had sent them. Stella saw the shock on his face and realized he knew nothing about it. After a moment's thought, she understood what had happened and muttered, "Well, at least she knows her place." But the next second, she was pushed aside. Ethan clutched the ring, suddenly remembering Felicity, whom he had left at the manor. He scrambled to his feet, ignoring Stella's calls from behind him, and drove frantically back to the manor. But when he returned, Felicity was nowhere to be found. He got back in the car and rushed home. The house was empty. Not only was she gone, but everything related to her had been wiped clean. He searched the rooms, hoping to find something she had missed, but all he found on the living room table was a signed divorce agreement. It was only then that Ethan finally understood what Felicity had meant that morning when she said she had thrown out everything from when they were married. She hadn't just thrown away the traces of their life together. She had thrown away their marriage. She had thrown away him. He stared blankly at the wedding ring in his hand, then noticed that the place where his own ring used to be was empty. The indentation on his skin almost faded. Ethan suddenly remembered the first day he took off his wedding ring. Felicity had asked him why. He had been dismissive, making up a random excuse that it was inconvenient for surgery. She hadn't said anything then, but her eyes already held a look of understanding. She never asked about it again. Did she not see? No, she probably already knew his answer. Indeed, he wasn't a new doctor, nor was it his first surgery. Even if it was inconvenient, he had always remembered to put it back on before. But later, he never put it back on again. Had Felicity sensed something was wrong back then? But thinking about it, that didn't seem right either. Chapter 11, it probably traced back to the day he returned from Iceland. That day, he brought her a cake with peanut brittle she was allergic to. She had only given him a simple reminder. When he gave her the necklace, she no longer had the joy she used to show when receiving gifts. Ethan instinctively took out his phone to call Felicity, but the automated message, "The number you have dialed is no longer in service," reminded him that she had deleted all her accounts a few days ago. So she had been signaling her departure all along. He just hadn't paid attention. Ding, a new email notification. He opened it. It was from an unknown account. The message contained a single photo. It was a screenshot of a social media post from Stella, with the caption, "One last time seeing the aurora with you, then I'm coming home with you." The post was dated on their 5th wedding anniversary, so she had known all along. She knew his sudden departure before their anniversary wasn't for a business trip, but to see the northern lights with Stella. An overwhelming wave of regret swept over his senses. He finally realized his own stupidity. His supposedly clever deceptions were like a transparent cloth to her, offering no cover at all. But he had never wanted to divorce her. He just couldn't let go of his obsession with Stella, which was why he had made a terrible choice when he heard she was returning to the country. But she could have stopped him. Why did she choose to leave so quietly? He sobbed uncontrollably, then suddenly remembered that this email must have been sent by Felicity. He quickly clicked on the sender's information, only to be met with a notification that the account had been deleted. She was so ruthless, leaving him with no hope at all. His gaze fell on the divorce agreement on the table. A spark of hope ignited in his eyes. He hadn't signed it yet, they hadn't gotten a divorce certificate. That meant he was still her husband. Their marriage wasn't over. He grabbed the divorce agreement and tore it to shreds with a fierce motion. He wouldn't sign it. He wouldn't give up on her. But first, Ethan thought there was someone he needed to deal with. Half an hour later, he was knocking on Stella's door. Seeing Ethan, Stella's face lit up with surprise. She hadn't expected him to come back. Before she could say anything, a sharp slap landed on her face. Slap, she clutched her cheek, tears of indignation welling in her eyes. She pointed at him, her gaze filled with disbelief. "You dare hit me. My own parents have never laid a hand on me." She thought her aggrieved look would evoke at least a shred of pity from him, but his eyes held only fury, a fury mixed with a hint of hatred. "Shouldn't I hit you? Who gave you the nerve to go to Felicity and post all that nonsense? Stella Quinn, when you did all this, did you feel no shame at all? Is this what the Quinn family taught you? To knowingly be the other woman, to flaunt it in front of the wife? Do you have no shame?" His words were harsh, trampling her dignity underfoot, but they also ignited her own anger. "I have no shame?" Stella laughed, a sound full of rage, and slapped him back. "Ethan Blackwood, are you pathetic or what? You say I have no shame? Then who was it that saw my social media post and came running, buying a ticket to Iceland just to see the northern lights with me? Even I saw her post about the aurora. What about you, her so-called husband? Did you see it? Did you ever offer to take her? Did I force you to go to Iceland with me? Did I force you to fill your phone with my pictures? Did I force you to abandon her, the one who needed emergency care, to save me? Did I force you to leave her time and time again? Isn't it because you're a pathetic wretch? I just had to wave my hand, and you came crawling back like a lapdog." Chapter 12. Ethan had never seen this side of Stella. In his presence, she had always been the cute, spoiled young lady. Even when she threw little tantrums, it was more of a playful act. But now, she was furious, her face contorted with rage, using the most humiliating words to counter his outburst. She had even slapped him. But it was because of her words that Ethan learned that Felicity had also wanted to see the northern lights. What must she have felt when she saw his social media post about being in Iceland with Stella? The regret in his heart swelled. Looking at the instigator of it all, he could no longer contain his temper and began to fight with her. Ethan was, after all, a man. Stella, a pampered young lady, was no match for his strength. She was injured more in the scuffle, but he didn't come out unscathed either, ending up disheveled from her hair pulling and kicking. The fight eventually attracted the attention of the neighbors, who called the police. The farce only ended when they were pulled apart by officers, but this confrontation also led to a complete breakdown of their relationship. Ethan tried to find Felicity, but it was only then he realized he knew nothing about her social circle. The only address he knew was her company's, but when he went there, he was only told that she had been transferred abroad. He had no other leads. He contacted Felicity's boss, Lisa, but although she knew where Felicity was, she refused to tell him. He searched every possible place, but could find no trace of her. 2 years later, at a city airport, Felicity pushed her luggage cart out of the terminal. She adjusted her sunglasses, looking around, but didn't see the person she was expecting. She frowned and muttered to herself, "The person Lisa arranged to pick me up is so unreliable. I'm already out, and there's still no sign of them." It was just a quiet complaint, but a man passing by her suddenly stopped. "Felicity," the man's slightly surprised voice sounded beside her. A hand suddenly grabbed her wrist, the one pulling the luggage cart. Felicity's frown deepened. She turned her head, looked at the man holding her, and pulled down her sunglasses, her impatience clear in her eyes. Ethan Blackwood? Although Felicity had been abroad for the past 2 years, as a fashion designer, she couldn't avoid the internet. She was more or less aware of the news from back home. So she knew that not long after she left, he had deliberately exposed Stella's affair, revealing that she had knowingly been the other woman in a marriage. As the former principal ballet dancer for the Bluebird Opera House, Stella was naturally subjected to intense public criticism. After the scandal, Stella's reputation was ruined. Due to the public backlash, the Bluebird Opera House issued a statement firing her. The dream she had pursued for so long was ultimately shattered because of her own poor choices. Ethan, as the cheating party, was also a target of online condemnation. But as a top surgeon at his hospital, he wasn't easily let go. In addition, although his father, Mr. Blackwood Sr., had been distant for years, when Ethan was attacked by public opinion, the Blackwood Corporation stepped in to suppress the negative press, shielding him from punishment. That was why, upon returning from a business trip, he had run into Felicity, who was back in the country for work. But the moment he saw the undisguised disgust in her eyes, his heart ached again. "Felicity, you're back. Are you leaving again?" Felicity didn't answer his question. Her eyes fell on the hand grabbing hers, her voice icy. "Let go." He released her reflexively, but after she had been gone for so long, he couldn't bear to let her leave just like that. But the moment he let go, she recoiled as if from a snake, taking several steps back. "Mr. Blackwood, please have some self-respect. We have no relationship now. It's better to keep our distance." Hearing her words, Ethan immediately retorted, "I never agreed to the divorce, Felicity. Please give me another chance. I truly know I was wrong. I promise I will never make the same mistake again. Felicity, I never signed those divorce papers. We never went to get the certificate. You are still my wife," he said, looking at her with deep emotion, trying to reawaken the love she once had for him. Chapter 13. Felicity hadn't expected him to say that. She certainly hadn't expected that, after she had graciously stepped aside for him and his unforgettable white moonlight, he would cling so tightly to their marriage. Leaving the country secretly without his knowledge had been a hasty decision on her part. But she smiled. "That's fine. If you're unwilling to agree to a divorce by mutual consent, I can always sue for one." She pushed her luggage cart past him and continued walking. "In any case, we've been separated for 2 years. Even if I sue, the court will grant it." With that, she didn't spare another glance at Ethan's face and walked away. Ethan had thought that by not signing the divorce papers, he could keep Felicity by his side. He had forgotten that in this world, divorce by mutual consent was not the only way. But this finally made him realize just how determined Felicity was to leave. Even after 2 years, she still hadn't forgiven him. His heart ached uncontrollably. He stared blankly in the direction she had left, only to see a young man run up to her, out of breath, and naturally take the luggage cart from her hand. She exchanged a few words with the man, their interaction familiar and easy, as if they had known each other for a long time. So quickly, she already had someone else in her life. In that instant, jealousy grew wildly in his heart, a desperate wish for the man beside her to disappear forever. But right now, apart from watching her from behind, he could do nothing. He didn't even have the courage to appear before her again. She hated him. "Dr. Blackwood, what are you still doing here? The director is on the phone, urging us to hurry back." Another doctor, who had fallen behind, came over and saw Ethan still standing there in a daze. He couldn't help but remind him. Only then did Ethan snap back to reality. He took one last deep look in the direction she had gone before turning to leave. He wouldn't give up so easily. At least for now, she was still his wife. That fact wouldn't change. Meanwhile, a driver got out of a car and took the luggage from Leo Pembroke, who then got into the car with Felicity. "Leo, what are you doing here picking me up?" The Pembroke family was a leader in the fashion design industry, and Leo Pembroke was the sole heir to the Pembroke Corporation, with significant influence abroad. If Felicity hadn't been promoted through her transfer, she wouldn't have had the chance to work with the Pembroke Corporation, even if her company had a partnership with them. But after that one collaboration, the two of them had started to keep in touch privately. However, no matter how good their relationship was, Felicity had never imagined he would be the one to pick her up. She asked in disbelief, "How did Lisa manage to order you around?" "Of course, she can't. Unless yours truly is willing, not even my grandfather could make me do anything I don't want to," he declared grandly, looking like a proud peacock. "I came to pick you up because I wanted to see you." His first sentence made her want to laugh, but his second was so direct it wiped the smile from her face. Leo Pembroke had never hidden the fact that he liked her, but she found it hard to move on from her past relationship. Ethan had been a major part of her life. The 7 years she had a crush on him, the 5 years they were married, she had truly believed they would spend the rest of their lives together. But everything she had strived for, Stella could take away with a simple wave of her hand, capturing all his attention. Even though he had later cut ties with Stella, what was the use? The hurt he had caused her wouldn't disappear. The fact that he had cheated wouldn't be erased by his later attempts to make amends. She hated him, detested him, even despised him. With such emotions, she couldn't accept a new relationship. And now, she was even less able to. Leo Pembroke, Felicity sighed, looking at him. Although I hate to admit it, I have to tell you, I'm not divorced yet. Chapter 14, I left in a hurry 2 years ago. I left a signed divorce agreement and went abroad. At the time, seeing him so consumed with his first love, I thought he would sign it as soon as he saw it. But for some reason, they had a falling out and didn't end up together, and he never signed the papers. So legally, we're still married. Her sudden confession caught Leo Pembroke off guard. He hadn't expected the woman he'd been pursuing for 2 years to still be married. He was a little disappointed, but his usual flamboyant demeanor didn't change. His tone was suggestive. It doesn't matter that you're not divorced. From the sound of it, you're going to divorce him eventually, right? If you don't mind a little something on the side while you're still married, I could stoop to that. If you do mind, I can wait until you're divorced. His forwardness was enough to shock Felicity, but she wasn't the only one shocked, so was the driver in the front seat. He coughed violently, almost losing his grip on the steering wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror. He only quickly looked away when he saw Leo's murderous glare. But as soon as he dropped them off at their destination, he hid behind the car and quickly called Grandpa Pembroke. Master Pembroke, the young master says he's going to be a homewrecker for love, far away in another country. Grandpa Pembroke answered the phone, only to be hit with a bombshell that made him spit out the tea he had just sipped. He said what? But Felicity was oblivious to all of this. She had originally returned to the country for work that required coordination with the domestic team, but now she had one more thing to do. She had to finalize her divorce before her next trip to France. Felicity didn't quite know why Ethan and Stella had ended up in such a bitter feud, nor did she care to find out. She just hadn't expected to see Stella Quinn again so suddenly. It was at a charity gala. Felicity entered with her boss, Lisa. As soon as she walked into the hall, she saw Stella clinging to a man's arm. Her face was gaunt, but she still carried herself with the air of a wealthy young lady. But the moment she saw Felicity, anger clouded her judgment, and a piercing scream echoed through the hall. "Felicity Gardner, what are you doing here?" In an instant, all eyes turned to her, and the man beside her became the center of gossip as well. The man's name was Franklin Hobbs, a notorious playboy from a city, known mostly for the scandalous news involving him and his circle of friends. Stella, having been meticulously groomed by the Quinn family, would have had plenty of options for a marital alliance, even if it was arranged. But 2 years ago, she had been embroiled in that ugly scandal. While open relationships were not unheard of in wealthy circles, those were private matters. Stella's scandal was public knowledge, and it had even cost her her career. With marriage as her only remaining option, she was forced to accept the choices her father made for her men like Franklin, whose reputations were equally tarnished. After all, as long as their reputations didn't affect the business partnerships between their families, they were still useful. But how could Stella, who had once been so admired, accept such a fate? She had argued with her father, with Franklin, and watched herself wither away day by day, while Franklin remained arrogant. Before, she had no one to vent her anger on and had to swallow her pride. But now, seeing the radiant Felicity, she could no longer contain her fury. Before she could say another word, Franklin Hobbs, embarrassed by the gossip, slapped her across the face. "What's with all the shouting? Is this how the Quinn family raised you?" Chapter 15, struck suddenly by her husband, with the whispers and stares of others all around, Stella looked up in anguish, only to see Felicity watching the scene with an amused expression. She stormed up to Felicity, her face contorted with rage, and raised her hand to strike. But Felicity took a step back, and before Stella could react, returned the slap. "Stella Quinn, do you really think I'm a pushover?" The slap stunned Stella. In her mind, Felicity was the epitome of weakness. She had stolen Ethan, sent Felicity social media posts visible only to her, and Felicity had never reacted, only swallowing her pain and pretending not to care. But if she truly didn't care, why would she have left without a word, deliberately leaving behind those things to cause a rift between Ethan and her, leading to her current downfall? And now, she dared to hit her. The more she thought about it, the more unbelievable it seemed. Her face twisted into an even uglier mask. "You viper, you dare hit me? I'll kill you," but the next second she was kicked to the ground, followed by a low, deep voice. "I think the word viper suits you better. After all, you're the one who shamelessly threw yourself at a man you knew was married, aren't you?" Stella sat collapsed on the floor, staring in shock at the man before her. It was Leo Pembroke. How did that viper Felicity manage to keep Ethan obsessed with her, and then immediately latch onto the heir of the Pembroke Corporation? She didn't dare vent her anger at Leo, so she turned her fury back to Felicity. But before she could speak, Franklin Hobbs, seeing that even Leo Pembroke was defending Felicity, knew he couldn't let her continue. "Haven't you embarrassed yourself enough? Get out of here now." Without another word, and ignoring Stella's struggles, he apologized to Leo and Felicity and dragged her out of the gala. With the troublemakers gone and the show over, the crowd dispersed. Leo scanned Felicity from top to bottom and only relaxed when he saw she was unharmed. "Good, not hurt. You didn't embarrass me." "Even if I were embarrassed, how would that reflect on the great Mr. Pembroke?" Felicity rolled her eyes at him. He shook his head disapprovingly. "You're the woman I've set my sights on. If you got hurt, people would say it's because I didn't protect you well." As they were talking, a figure forcefully squeezed between them. Ethan Blackwood hadn't been interested in such galas, so he had arrived late. He had just gotten there when the commotion started. Since Felicity was surrounded by people, he hadn't seen her and didn't come over. It was only after Stella was dragged away and the crowd scattered that he realized Felicity had been at the center of the dispute. He wanted to go to her, but the first thing he saw was the intimate posture of the two of them. A burst of jealousy made him act without thinking, and he pushed his way between them. But the moment he appeared, Felicity, who had been laughing and talking just a second before, her face immediately darkened. "What are you doing here?" Ethan's face was filled with anger. He watched Leo warily. "Felicity, what's your relationship with him?" She took a few steps back, putting distance between them, her voice tinged with impatience. "What my relationship with him has to do with you is none of your business." Chapter 16 then, as if suddenly remembering something, she let out a sneer. "Oh, right, we're not divorced yet. You tore up the last agreement. I'll have a new one drawn up tomorrow and sent to you. Make sure you sign it." Hearing her words, Ethan's eyes couldn't help but redden. "Felicity, I truly know I was wrong. Can you just give me one more chance?" While they were talking, Leo had already sidled up next to her again. He put on a deliberately whiny voice, speaking to Ethan with mock fear. "Felicity, he's so scary. I'm so frightened," the affected voice in her ear, combined with the sight of Ethan who looked ready to explode with rage, made Felicity want to be anywhere else. She shot Leo a glare and turned to leave. She was here with Lisa for a reason, not to entertain their madness. Seeing her leave, Leo quickly followed. She didn't stop him. But when Ethan also tried to follow, she turned back and gave him a look of disgust. "Stop being so clingy. It's repulsive." That one sentence stopped Ethan in his tracks. He didn't want to give up on her, but he also didn't want her to despise him. Felicity was as good as her word. The very next day, she had her lawyer bring a newly drafted divorce agreement to Ethan. He had just torn one up, and the lawyer simply produced another. "It's no problem. Miss Gardner anticipated you would tear it up. She specifically instructed me to prepare several copies to ensure you have enough to tear to your heart's content." Ethan stared at the divorce agreement placed before him again. His right hand instinctively went to his left, caressing the wedding ring on his ring finger. He had since found the wedding ring he had discarded. Felicity's was too small for him to wear, so he had strung it on a chain and wore it as a necklace. He still stubbornly believed that one day that ring would return to its rightful owner. But he didn't know that once some people decide to leave, they are gone forever. "Have her come talk to me in person. Otherwise, I won't sign." The two of them faced off in a stalemate. In the end, the lawyer called Felicity, and after consulting with her, they agreed to meet in person in 2 days. The 2 days passed in a flash. Ethan chose the meeting place, a couple's restaurant they had frequented during their marriage. Revisiting the old place, it was impossible not to feel something. But Felicity's main goal was to get Ethan to sign the divorce papers as quickly as possible. Sitting down at their reserved table, she got straight to the point, pulling a divorce agreement from her bag and placing it in front of him. Her words were sparse. "Sign it." He stared at the agreement, pushed in front of him for the countless time, lost in a daze until a tear fell. Her impatient voice broke the silence. "Are there any other issues? If not, please sign it quickly." He looked up at her, his voice choked with emotion. "Felicity, I know I wronged you. I was a fool. I couldn't see my own heart. I don't even know when I truly fell in love with you. Stella was just an obsession from my youth, something I couldn't have. I truly know I was wrong, Felicity. Can you give me one more chance? I promise I will never make the same mistake again. Can't we go back to how things were before?" He spoke with heartfelt sincerity, but she remained unmoved. "No. Ethan Blackwood, time doesn't rewind, the damage can't be undone, and the fact that you cheated won't change. We will never go back to how we were before." Chapter 17, Felicity felt no temptation at his mention of going back to how things were. After all, his before consisted of her wholehearted devotion against his feigned tenderness and occasional neglect. The look in the eyes of someone in love cannot be hidden, and back then, there was no love in his eyes when he looked at her. Ethan closed his eyes in pain. After a long moment, as if remembering something, a flicker of hope appeared in his eyes. "You once promised me that you would always be with me, that you would never abandon me." He thought bringing up this promise would make her stay, but instead, he saw her let out a sneer, a mocking smile on her face. "A promise? Ethan Blackwood, have you forgotten? I wasn't the only one who made a promise. At our wedding, didn't you also promise me that you would forget Stella Quinn and build a life with me? But what happened? Did you keep your promise? You can't even keep your own promises, so what right do you have to demand that others keep theirs?" Ethan's face turned deathly pale. It was as if, only in this moment, he finally understood that Felicity would never forgive him. But he still stubbornly shook his head, his eyes filled with obstinance. "I won't sign any divorce agreement. Felicity, I won't let you go just like that." Since she already despised him so much, what did it matter if she despised him a little more? As long as he could keep her by his side, he was willing to be a shameless pest. The moment his words fell, Felicity stood up straight. "Since Dr. Blackwood is unwilling to settle this amicably, then I'll see you in court." Ethan wasn't afraid of going to court. He knew that divorce cases weren't so easily won these days. At the very least, she would have to prove their relationship had broken down. He still loved her. How could their relationship be considered broken? "Felicity, you are mine, and you can only be mine." Felicity, already walking away, didn't hear his words. Even if she had, she would have only found them disgusting. At that moment, she was just incredibly thankful that her heart was already dead to him, that she no longer held any expectations for him. Felicity had long been prepared to fight a divorce case against Ethan. It would indeed be troublesome, which was why she had initially chosen to negotiate with him to sign the papers. Now that he was unwilling to cooperate, she wasn't afraid of the trouble. After consulting with her lawyer, Felicity began to prepare the necessary materials. The evidence of Ethan's affair was old, and collecting it would be difficult. But fortunately for her, one of the protagonists of the affair was the once famous principal ballet dancer of the Bluebird Opera House, Stella Quinn. And fortunately, Ethan, in his quest for revenge against Stella, had made the affair a widely publicized event. Although the Blackwood family had managed to extricate Ethan from the scandal at the time, the female protagonist of the story had lost her job because of it. A woman who knowingly becomes the other woman is certainly despicable, but a married man who flirts with another woman, and then, after the affair is exposed, tries to evade responsibility and use his family's influence to make himself invisible in the story, is that man not just as disgusting? She gathered all the news articles related to the incident, evidence that she had hired a lawyer to draft a divorce agreement before she left the country, and records of her multiple requests for a divorce after her return, and gave them all to her lawyer. This time, she would cut ties with him completely and thoroughly. After receiving the materials from Felicity, her lawyer confidently assured her that they were more than sufficient. She promised to win the divorce case for her beautifully, so much so that Felicity wouldn't even need to appear in court herself. Chapter 18, after entrusting the divorce proceedings entirely to her lawyer, Felicity was left with only business matters. Felicity, now that you're back, if you don't want to go back to France, you can stay here in the country. The company is developing a new division that will be spun off into a separate entity. This is part of the reason I asked you to come back. If you stay, you can take over the new subsidiary directly. Felicity was very tempted by Lisa's proposal. This was her home country, and she would be happy to stay. But being in France would be more beneficial for her career. If she took over the subsidiary, she would have more responsibilities. She had no experience in that area and was hesitant to take on too much. Moreover, if she diverted her energy, she would have less time for design. So, after much deliberation, Felicity finally said, "Let me think about it. It's right to consider it carefully, but the subsidiary can't wait too long." Lisa wasn't surprised by her decision. She paused, then continued, "How about this? I'll give you 3 months. You can try it out, get a feel for it, and then give me your final answer. If you decide to go back to France, I'll arrange for someone to take over from you." Felicity accepted the proposal. 3 months was also enough time for her divorce case to be settled. Just as she left the company building, Felicity saw Leo Pembroke waiting at the entrance. The moment he saw her, he started waving his arm so enthusiastically it looked like it might come off. She was a bit surprised and asked him, "What are you doing here? Is the great young master of the Pembroke family so idle? And it's not even closing time. How did you know I was leaving?" He just gave her a mysterious look and said 2 words, "It's a secret." She scoffed, unimpressed by his attempt at mystery. But when he dropped her off at home and was about to leave, she suddenly spoke up. "I might not be going back to France." His retreating figure froze. He stopped, turned to look at her, his eyes filled with surprise. If one looked closely, one could also see a hint of disappointment. "Have you decided?" Lisa made a suggestion. "I haven't confirmed yet, but I grew up here after all." Felicity shook her head. She looked around, taking in the familiar surroundings. "If I can stay, of course I'd rather stay here." She was born and raised in this land. This would always be her home, but Leo was different. The Pembroke family's main business was abroad. His parents and grandparents were also abroad. In the end, he would probably return to France. Leo didn't look happy when he left. Felicity knew why he was upset. During her 2 years abroad, when she was in an unfamiliar country, he had helped her a lot. He had followed her from abroad back to her home country, supported her, and saved her from a lot of trouble. Even when he found out she wasn't divorced yet, he helped her find a lawyer and even said he could humble himself and wait for her to be divorced. Thinking of this, she couldn't help but laugh out loud. If the Pembroke family found out about his ideas, they would probably fly back to the country and break his legs. Little did she know, on the very day Leo had said those words, the Pembroke family driver had already relayed the message back home, in words so sharp they stunned the entire Pembroke family. A few days later, Grandpa Pembroke bought a plane ticket and flew to the country. And he did indeed give Leo a beating. Chapter 19, the first hearing for Felicity and Ethan's divorce case was a month later. The case was won easily, without even needing a second hearing. Felicity got the judgment she wanted. The moment she received the divorce certificate, she felt a wave of pure relief wash over her. This was probably the most relaxed she had felt in the past 2 years. The obsession that had weighed on her heart could finally be let go. From now on, she was completely and utterly free of that man. With the matter of Ethan settled, Felicity ultimately chose to stay in the country and take over the new subsidiary. She had thought that after their last conversation, Leo wouldn't come looking for her anymore. But on her first official day in her new position, he showed up. Oh my, how heartbreaking. The young master is so good to you, and on such a joyous day, such happy news, you don't even tell me. Leo stood in front of Felicity, feigning heartbreak and wiping away imaginary tears. His tall frame cast a shadow over her, and though his actions were theatrical, they were still imposing. Felicity took 2 steps back, out of his shadow, and turned her head away. Where he couldn't see, a blush rose on her cheeks. Even if I didn't tell you, you still found your way here, didn't you? You inviting me and me finding my own way here are 2 different things. Felicity, you have to properly compensate my wounded heart. Seeing her eyes widen as she turned back, The heat on her face not yet faded, Leo's playful side took over, and he pinched her cheek. Felicity was thin, with not much flesh on her face, so the pinch wasn't very satisfying. Seeing the dissatisfaction on her face, he let go and smiled. "How about this? You treat me to a meal as your apology." This wasn't an unreasonable request. Leo had helped her so much, and she did indeed need to treat him to a meal to thank him. Felicity nodded and agreed to his proposal. Seeing her nod, Leo was visibly pleased. He declared that since she was treating him, he should be the one to choose the restaurant. Having already agreed to one request, Felicity didn't insist on this point and let him have his way. It was only when they arrived at the chosen restaurant that she realized he had picked a couple's restaurant. She paused, glanced at him, but seeing his completely unconcerned expression, she hesitated several times but ultimately said nothing. Perhaps it was just a random restaurant he had chosen. If she brought it up so abruptly, it might only make things more awkward. Lost in her thoughts, she didn't see the faint smile that curved Leo's lips as he walked ahead. A waiter led them to their reserved private room. Not long after they sat down, the waiter began to serve the dishes. Felicity was surprised again. She saw him raise an eyebrow and knew he had already ordered the food when he made the reservation. And a look at the dishes on the table revealed they were all her favorites. Her expression grew dazed, a strange feeling stirring in her heart. He was truly good to her, but it seemed in the end, she could only let his kindness go to waste. While she was lost in thought, the waiter had finished serving the last dish and was now presenting a dessert with a standard smile on his face. "Sir, ma'am, the restaurant has a special event today. You are the 520th couple to dine with us today. This is a complimentary dessert from the restaurant for our 2 lucky customers. Please enjoy." Felicity snapped back to reality at the word couple, her face flushing red. She was about to explain, but on the other side, Leo had already accepted the waiter's words. "Well, thank you very much." The waiter smiled, nodded, and left the room. Felicity turned back, about to say something, but saw his happy, satisfied expression. He even picked up the heart-shaped dessert the waiter had brought and offered it to her. "Try it. The desserts at this restaurant are pretty good." Seeing this, a hint of annoyance appeared on her face. "You did this on purpose, didn't you?" Leo shrugged with an expression that said, "You've got me all wrong," and leaned closer to her. "How could you think of me like that, Felicity? It's so hurtful." Felicity shivered from the goosebumps his words gave her. She took a piece of dessert from the plate and stuffed it into his mouth. "Just eat." But with that, the matter was considered closed. Chapter 20, after dinner, they walked out of the restaurant one after the other. He ruffled the top of her hair and told her to wait there while he went to get the car. Seeing her nod obediently, Leo smiled before turning to leave. Felicity watched his retreating back, lost in thought. Just then, a figure suddenly appeared in front of her. She looked closely and realized it was Ethan Blackwood. His eyes were filled with pain. He reached out and grabbed Felicity's hand, his voice accusatory. "Felicity, did you insist on divorcing me because of him?" Felicity yanked her hand away in disgust, looking at Ethan with bewilderment. "Do you have no self-awareness at all? Do you really not know why I wanted a divorce? Why drag other people into this? I just made a mistake that any man would make. Why won't you forgive me?" But he seemed incapable of understanding, trying to take her hand again. "Felicity, give me one more chance. I promise you I will treat you well. Isn't that good enough? You used to love me so much, how could you just leave without even giving me a single chance?" The moment his hand reached for her again, Felicity took a sharp step back, creating distance between them. "Mr. Blackwood, please have some self-respect." This time, her eyes were filled with nothing but ice. "If you try to touch me again, I won't hesitate to call the police and have you spend some time at the station. I wonder if Mr. Blackwood causes another scandal, will the Blackwood family be able to suppress the news for you? If things get serious, I wonder if Dr. Blackwood will be able to keep his position this time." Her words were cruel enough, and they were enough to stop him. Ethan's face was still contorted in pain, but he didn't dare take another step forward. Because he knew, given her current attitude towards him, she would absolutely do as she said. Just then, Leo pulled up in his car. He glanced at Ethan's pained expression and sneered. "Some people, they don't appreciate their wife when they have one. They have to go out and fool around. Then when their wife is gone, they come back crying and regretting it. Seeing Ethan's face darken, he looked away from him and turned to Felicity. "Felicity, get in the car, I'll take you home." Felicity paid no more attention to Ethan's expression or thoughts. She walked past him to the car, opened the door, got in, and told Leo to drive away quickly. With a "You got it, ma'am," the car sped off, leaving Ethan with a mouthful of exhaust fumes. Ethan couldn't help but cough, watching the two of them disappear into the traffic, his face filled with resentment. Why? He hadn't made some unforgivable mistake. He had just strayed for a moment in his marriage without crossing the final line. Why couldn't Felicity forgive him? He couldn't understand, and there was no one to give him an answer. He stubbornly clung to his own thoughts, never once believing he was in the wrong. But now, even the marriage certificate, the only connection between them, was broken because of her cruelty. It seemed he no longer had any excuse to get close to her. And 3 days later, something happened that shattered him even more. Felicity and Leo Pembroke were together. Ethan stared at the photo sent from an unknown number on his phone, his eyes instantly turning red. The photo was of Felicity and Leo Pembroke, locked in a passionate kiss. Chapter 21, let's rewind to 3 days ago. After Leo dropped Felicity off at home, he didn't leave. Felicity was a little puzzled. Leo's words and actions today had been strange. The day she told him she might stay in the country, his reaction when he left seemed to suggest he was giving up on her. But today, from his sudden appearance to the deliberately ambiguous atmosphere he created at the restaurant, everything was sending her a message. He hadn't given up yet. But if he was so disappointed when she wasn't even sure if she was staying or leaving, why was he now, after she had confirmed she was staying, suddenly so hopeful again? Felicity voiced her confusion. He looked at her with disbelief. "Felicity, you're not planning to love me and leave me, are you?" His words stunned her. "Leo Pembroke, don't you dare accuse me of such things. When have I ever done that? My family found out about my offer to be your other man. They flew in from abroad and gave me a good beating. They said if I can't win you over fair and square, they won't even let me back in the house. Felicity, do you have the heart to see me homeless?" He looked at her pitifully, his eyes begging for sympathy. But Felicity didn't believe him, her expression clearly saying so. "Even if they don't let you back home, I don't believe you don't have other properties. And even if you can't go to those places, you're so rich, you could comfortably stay in any hotel." Seeing that she didn't believe him, he started to explain again. "They took my keys and froze my bank accounts. If you don't take me in, I'll really have to sleep on the streets. Felicity, how can you be so heartless?" By this point, Felicity had a pretty good idea of his real intentions. She straightened up, looked at him seriously, and laid her cards on the table. "Leo, I told you last time I'm staying in the country, but you'll eventually go back to France." Before she could finish, Leo suddenly laughed. "Felicity, you don't have to worry about that. My grandfather said that while our family's business is mainly abroad, it doesn't mean we don't have any here. Besides, my grandfather is getting old. He's been thinking about returning to the country anyway. You know how old people are, they want to return to their roots. So now, all your worries are gone. Can you accept me now?" Fast forward to 3 days later. Seeing their official announcement, Ethan was consumed with jealousy. He couldn't believe that Felicity was really with someone else. But no matter what he thought, he couldn't change the fact that not only were Felicity and Leo together, but the news had even made headlines. Along with this news came the rumor that the Pembroke family was planning to expand its market in the country. At this juncture, it was obvious why the Pembroke family was making this move. As a result, under this trending topic, netizens were buzzing with comments, exclaiming how sweet it was. "What a beautiful love story. I'm so envious. When will something like this happen to me? To the person above, I suggest you go to sleep. Dreaming is faster. Did I just stumble into a rom-com? I'm so jealous." All sorts of comments flooded the screen, mostly jokes and blessings. Only one newly posted comment was filled with malice. "She gets divorced and immediately latches onto a rich family. Who knows what tricks she used?" But very quickly, without even needing Leo to step in, the commenter was chased down and cursed out by other users, deleting the comment and fleeing, even deleting their account. Chapter 22, the netizens dealt with it so quickly that Leo was left with a surge of anger and nowhere to vent it. Felicity looked at his pouting face and couldn't help but laugh out loud. But when his resentful gaze fell on her, she quickly suppressed her smile. He pursed his lips and turned his head away, muttering, "Who am I so angry for, huh? And she's laughing at me. Ungrateful." Hearing his resentful words, she pinched his cheek until he glared at her, then let go and said seriously, all right. It's just a comment on the internet. I'm not going to lose a piece of flesh over it. Besides, the netizens have already scolded them back for me, haven't they? See, netizens can be very rational. Because the Pembroke family was expanding its domestic market, Leo became busier and could no longer keep track of Felicity's schedule as he used to. But it was because of this that Felicity learned in a chat with Lisa that he had always managed to appear at the right time because he had bribed her. She almost laughed with anger. And he pretended to be so mysterious with me. Turns out he was just using money magic. When he gets back, I'm going to teach him a good lesson. How dare he spy on me? On the other end, Lisa's voice, tinged with laughter, came through. Well, don't you dare say I told you, or I'll be out of a source of income. That afternoon, when Felicity left work, she didn't see Leo. Instead, she saw an unexpected person. Ethan Blackwood. She frowned, looking at the heavily disguised man in front of her, and instinctively took a step back. What are you doing here again? Ethan didn't answer her question. His expression was unreadable. He just said one thing. Felicity, is there really no chance for us? Seeing that he still wouldn't give up, Felicity couldn't be bothered to waste any more words on him. She had refused him countless times, but he was like a stubborn leech, living in his own world, unable to understand. Continuing to talk to him would be like playing a harp to a cow. She walked past him, heading towards her car. But she had only taken a few steps when she suddenly smelled a pungent odor. A sense of unease rose in her heart. She quickened her pace, unlocked her car, and opened the door in one smooth motion. Just as she was about to relax, a wave of dizziness washed over her. She collapsed, and before losing consciousness, she forced her eyes open for one last look. What she saw was Ethan's triumphant gaze. Felicity, why can't you just be obedient? 3 hours later, Felicity finally woke up. The familiar furniture and layout told her she was in their marital home. The only difference from when she had left 2 years ago was that he had, from memory, rebought everything she had thrown away. Seeing her awake, a man's voice sounded beside her. Felicity, look. Isn't this room exactly the same as it was? You really threw out a lot of things. It wasn't easy to replace everything. I searched for a long time to get it all back. He talked to himself, then, as if remembering something, he took the ring from his neck, took her hand, and, ignoring her resistance, put the ring on her finger. I got the wedding ring back too. Felicity, this time, don't leave me, okay? Felicity had been drugged. Although she was awake now, her head was still fuzzy. But the moment Ethan touched her, a wave of nausea washed over her, and she instinctively tried to pull away. But weak as she was, she couldn't overcome his grip. Hearing his words, Felicity couldn't hold it back and vomited. Chapter 23, her reaction made Ethan's face darken. You despise me that much. But Felicity, you used to love me so much. You loved me for so long, why can't you just love me a little longer? After throwing up, Felicity's mind finally cleared and some of her strength returned. She forcefully shook off his hand, her face a mask of disbelief. Ethan Blackwood, you're insane. This is illegal, do you know that? Yes, I'm insane. He let out a sneer, then looked at the woman on the bed with a deeply affectionate expression. Felicity, I really can't live without you. I used to think I loved Stella, that's why I strayed for her. But Felicity, when I found out you had left me, the pain in my heart told me that I had already fallen in love with you. When Stella left me to go abroad back then, I didn't feel this much pain. Felicity, I truly know I was wrong. Please forgive me, okay? Felicity sat up in bed, scrambling backward to avoid his touch. Then, with a sharp smack, she slapped him hard across the face. Ethan Blackwood, what face do you have to ask for forgiveness? Yes, I used to love you, but as you said, that was the past, not now. When I loved you, you didn't cherish it. Your heart and eyes were filled with your first love. For her, you could even abandon your professional ethics. And now that I've left, you say you love me? I don't think so. Is it me you love? I highly doubt it. Your actions now are nothing more than your unwillingness to accept defeat, driven by your shattered pride, aren't they? You're just unwilling to be abandoned by your parents, by your beloved, and by me, the person you thought would never leave you. But you're just that pathetic. The more someone loves you, the less you care. The more someone wants to leave, the more you try to hold on. But Ethan Blackwood, no one will wait for you forever. Look, even your own parents don't want you. Who gave you the confidence to think that someone would never be able to leave you? Felicity had been with Ethan from age 15 to 27, a full 12 years. He had once been the most important part of her life. She knew exactly where to twist the knife to make it hurt the most. Her merciless words indeed stabbed Ethan. His eyes turned bloodshot and his reason snapped. He lunged forward recklessly, trying to grab her. But just as he got close, she grabbed a vase from behind her and smashed it over his head. With a crash, the vase shattered from the force of the blow, followed by the sound of broken porcelain scattering on the floor. Intense pain shot through his nerves. He reached up to touch his head and felt a sticky wetness. When he brought his hand down, it was covered in crimson. The pain shocked his reason back into him. He looked at Felicity, who was still holding a shard of the vase, pointing it at him. He let out a bitter laugh. "You actually hurt me." As if he never expected Felicity to lash out so violently, his heart felt desolate. He watched her wary eyes, fell silent, and then turned, walked out of the room, and locked the door, completely shutting her away. As the lock clicked into place, his voice came through the door. "Felicity, it doesn't matter if you hate me. It doesn't matter how you provoke me. It doesn't matter if you hurt me. I'll give you time to calm down. I won't let you leave. Felicity, you have to believe me. I really can't live without you." Inside the room, Felicity ignored his words and began to search frantically. She couldn't stay here. She had to escape. She wondered if Leo had noticed she was missing, if he was worried. She had to get back quickly. She couldn't let Leo worry. Meanwhile, the moment Leo had a free moment, he called Lisa. After learning that Felicity had already left work to go home, he quickly wrapped up his own work and rushed home. But when he arrived, the house was silent. There were no sounds, not even a light on. The silence filled him with a sudden sense of dread. He searched every room. No one. He checked the home security footage and found that Felicity had never come home at all. The unease in his heart grew stronger. Leo took out his phone and first called Felicity. He let it ring until the automated message said no one was available, then hung up and tried again. But time after time, the call went unanswered. Chapter 24, he called Lisa again. After confirming that Felicity had left the office at her usual time, they both started to panic. They reported her missing to the police and, after a long and frantic search, finally found the answer in the underground parking garage. Leo watched the security footage. He saw the man following behind Felicity, spraying her with a substance, and then carrying her away after she collapsed. The police became alert. "So brazen, does he think we don't exist?" one of the officers remarked, then began to analyze the video. "From the looks of it, this man probably knows Miss Gardner. Although there's no conversation, Miss Gardner's body language suggests she's familiar with him, but that he's someone she dislikes." This description immediately brought one person to Leo's mind. A man who had been incessantly harassing Felicity ever since she returned to the country, Ethan Blackwood. With this information, tracking him down was simple. Ethan didn't have many properties, and he rarely visited most of them lately. A quick search showed he had returned to the house he had been living in all along, and he had made no effort to hide himself as he carried Felicity's unconscious body. So, not long after Ethan finished bandaging his own head, the doorbell rang. He paused in the middle of packing away his first aid kit and looked towards the door. The bell rang again and again, tirelessly, as if the person outside was certain he was home and wouldn't leave until he answered. Ethan got up, walked to the door, and opened it. The moment he saw the police, he showed no signs of panic. "Officers, what can I do for you?" His calm demeanor was so convincing that if the police hadn't seen the footage of him drugging and kidnapping someone, they might have doubted if they had the right person. One officer showed Ethan his badge and pointed to his body camera. "Are you Mr. Ethan Blackwood?" Seeing the man nod, he continued, "We've received a report that Miss Gardner has gone missing today. We were wondering if you had any information." As he spoke, the officer's gaze fell on the bandage on his head. "How did you get that injury? Is it serious?" Ethan's eyes flickered past the officers to Leo standing behind them. He smiled and shook his head. "I haven't seen her today, so I have no information. As for the injury on my head, I'm a doctor. There was a small dispute at the hospital today and I got hit, but it's been treated, it's nothing serious." The two officers exchanged a glance, impressed by the man's composure. A doctor, indeed. The police asked a few more questions, all of which Ethan answered smoothly. Just as it seemed the questioning was over, he felt a sense of relief and even shot a triumphant glance at Leo. Just then, a muffled thud came from inside the house, like something heavy had fallen. Ethan's face froze. The two officers and Leo burst through the door and ran towards the sound. In that instant, Ethan understood everything. The moment they heard the sound, the police had rushed in without another question. They must have known it was him all along. His face turned ugly. He clenched his fists, knowing that today he wouldn't be able to keep Felicity. And with his previous testimony, he was likely in big trouble. Ethan didn't think any further. Seeing their attention focused on the room inside, he turned and bolted out the door, trying to escape. But he had barely made it outside when he ran straight into another police officer waiting there. As Ethan was pinned to the ground, the three officers from inside, along with Leo supporting Felicity, all came out. Seeing the extra officer, Ethan didn't know whether to be pleased or not. Should he say they valued him too much, or that they valued Felicity too much? Caught red-handed, Ethan was taken to the police station and detained. After Felicity and Leo gave their statements, they went home together. On the way, Felicity was incredibly quiet. It wasn't until they were finally home that she threw her arms around Leo and burst into tears. "Leo Pembroke, what took you so long?" Chapter 25, Leo had rarely seen this side of Felicity. He held her tightly, his heart aching, his voice filled with his own lingering fear. I'm sorry I made you wait." After a long while, Felicity's emotions finally stabilized. She looked at the patch on his chest, soaked with her tears, and a blush crept onto her face. "How did you find me?" Felicity wasn't surprised that they had found her, but she was curious how they seemed to know from the start that Ethan had taken her. They had even arranged for someone to create a distraction at the front, while someone else came from behind to rescue her. Such a flawless plan seemed more than just suspicion. Leo let out a snort, his eyes filled with contempt and mockery for Ethan. That idiot! He was so brazen about the whole thing, from the attack to the getaway. It would have been harder not to know it was him. At first, seeing how arrogant he was, we thought he might have had a psychotic break and was going to use force, so the police sent a whole team. But then, when he was still trying to lie during questioning, we knew. He's not crazy, just plain stupid. Felicity hadn't expected the police to deploy so many people for that reason and was taken aback for a moment. But in that instant, a flicker of annoyance crossed her mind. For him to be that stupid, and for me to still fall for it. I really shouldn't have. Perhaps sensing her thoughts, he chuckled and pulled her closer into his embrace. Who could have expected someone who is mentally sound to do something so insane? It's normal that you didn't see it coming. Besides, you did realize it later, you just didn't have time to get away. Felicity accepted this explanation, but after a moment, she sighed. The Blackwood family can't bail him out again this time, can they? If he gets out, I'll have to live in constant fear. Leo gently stroked her head, comforting her. Don't worry. The evidence is conclusive this time, and he was caught in the act. If the Blackwood family wants to save him, they'll have to argue insanity. But if they dare, I'll make sure he spends the rest of his life in a psychiatric hospital. Besides, he continued, whether the Blackwood family can protect Ethan also depends on whether my Pembroke family agrees to it. Do you think the Blackwoods would risk offending the Pembrokes for a son they've already abandoned once? Hearing Leo's explanation, Felicity finally felt her heart settle. 5 months later, Ethan's verdict came down. He was sentenced to 2 years in prison. With the Pembroke family's intervention, the Blackwood family didn't dare to step in. Just as Leo had said, the Blackwoods had no reason to offend the Pembrokes for a son they had already cast aside. The last time the Blackwoods had intervened, it was because saving him meant they could still claim a renowned, estranged son. This time, even if they intervened, he could never return to his former position. A son with no more use value was, naturally, disposable. The man who had always feared abandonment the most was finally abandoned by everyone. This time, without the Blackwood family to suppress the news, everything he had ever done was brought to light. In an instant, his reputation was in tatters. Even the hospital that had once protected him saw its own reputation suffer. 2 years later, Felicity and Leo held a magnificent wedding. Grandpa Pembroke and Leo's parents all flew in from abroad. Lisa, as the bride's sole bridesmaid, was running around, completely swamped. When she finally got a moment to breathe, she looked at Felicity with a mock-aggrieved expression. "Hey, Felicity Gardner, I was your boss once, you know. Now that you're the boss of the subsidiary, you're just going to work me to the bone like this." Felicity laughed awkwardly and tried to charm her. "Oh, come on. It's because you're my only good friend, my best friend." Lisa shivered off the goosebumps and mercilessly pushed her away. "Oh, please. Save those little tricks for your husband." The lavish wedding was the talk of the town for a long time, becoming a favorite topic of conversation in a city. And in a corner no one cared about, the now infamous Ethan Blackwood, released from prison, held a battered old phone. He watched the news, saw Felicity's blissful face as she walked towards another man, and couldn't stop his eyes from turning red. That happiness should have belonged to him, but he had personally thrown away the girl who had loved him most. From then on, happiness had nothing to do with him. The only thing he could do was hide in a corner and watch the woman who was the center of his world spend the rest of her life with someone else.